rest of the world has this huge dependence on pharmaceutical products from China. This comes to us from the Council on Foreign Relations, dug this up from last August in 2019. It says here last month, the U.S.-China Economic Review and Security Review Commission held a hearing on the United States' growing reliance on China's pharmaceutical products. Okay? Read down a little bit here, and there was a Department of Commerce study found that 97% of all antibiotics in the United States came from China. So that's a pretty heavy dependence, 97%. I found another article, and we looked at it a slightly different way. This comes from July of last year. And it really says that over the past 30 years, the U.S. drug manufacturing industry has been relocating offshore. You know, some of that went to India, and some of that went to Mexico, and a lot of it went to China. And it's not just the antibiotics. With generic drugs comprising 90% of the medicines that Americans consume, it turns out there's just this enormous reliance now on China to supply those and many other medications. So, for example, U.S. no longer makes penicillin. The last plant closed in 2004. The U.S. virtually has no capacity right now to make generic antibiotics to treat ear infections, strep throat, pneumonia, ordinary stuff like that. As well, we look at other generic drugs made by China. In China include antidepressants, birth control pills, chemotherapy medications. And China is also supplying the medicines that treat Alzheimer's and HIV, AIDS, diabetes, Parkinson, epilepsy, all that stuff. So even if you said that, well, now India has taken some of that, maybe we could resource that back over to India. Even India, they went on to say in this article, with its large generic drug industry, relies on China for 80% of the key ingredients it uses to make the generics that they make. So there's this extraordinary dependence on China for a lot of the medicines. If they remain shut down, we would expect to see supply disruptions in things like antibiotics. Why is that important? Well, if the nCoV virus is creating a lot of pneumonia, it creates a viral pneumonia, but then a secondary infection that can often happen as something that just sort of follows on along that. It's an opportunistic infection by bacteria, follows on and creates a bacterial pneumonia after that. Well, of course, you need to treat that with antibiotics. So there could be shortages of things like this depending on how long this goes on, but it's certainly a risk.